make a little quick video about Vacu-Maid inlets, their different styles through the years. Not only because I've never shared my little collection of them here, but also because of a recent post on Vacuum Land where there was some question about these inlets. And so Vacu-Maid, the 60s systems, like the P245, the one with the big Robbins and Myers motor, they used these, and I think these are really cool looking, these diamond shaped inlets. They did require kind of a precise plaster cutout. There wasn't a lot of room for error, but inside you'll notice there's one little contact, and if you look at the back, there's one wire coming off of this. Well, central vac control circuits, I mean, some of them use more than 2 wires, but they all need at least 2. And the other wire in this case would have been placed onto the metal of the mounting plate right here. And that's how these were installed. So when the neck of the inlet goes into the wall, it contacts the metal mounting plate, and this becomes your other side of the circuit. So when you put your hose end in, and originally the Vacu-Maid hose had a vinyl cuff with a brass tube over the end of the cuff, and that brass tube would go in and complete the circuit between the neck of the inlet and that one contact. Shortly after they made these, they decided to go to a rectangular inlet. This one's pretty nasty looking, wow. Same door pattern, but the rectangle allowed for coverage of sloppy cutouts from sloppy plasterers or sloppy retrofit central vac installers, as the case may be. We still have the one contact design inside the neck, and if you notice on the back here, we now have 2 wires. The other wire has been soldered directly to the neck of the inlet because they figured out that the connection between the wire to the plate to the neck of these inlets was often unreliable. So they went with that. And here's the mounting plate for one of these. This would have been used with either style. Pretty heavy stamped steel with a PVC flange 90 screwed to it. Some of these systems were installed with metal pipe and fittings, and so you'd have a cast aluminum flange 90, same size. And so that's what that looks like. After these, they went with a type, one of which I have installed here in my workshop. Appearance-wise, it's identical, but if you look inside, see how that little ball is larger now? Well, that ball now activates a micro switch. So instead of it making contact with the completing a circuit, it's just pressing on a switch. And so you're no longer relying on the face of the wall inlet as one of your parts of your electrical circuit, so that's probably a little safer. Whether or not that was more reliable is questionable. I have seen those micro switches fail. After that, after this style of inlet, and these are all 60s, 1960s, maybe let's say mid-1960s and late 1960s. Getting into the 70s was when you started to see the Vacu-Maid traditional with the rectangular door. And the earlier ones, boy, isn't that just hideously beautiful. You can see the back how the micro switch works. So the little ball presses on that and starts your system. This is an earlier type with screw holes at the top and bottom at 12 and 6 o'clock, and it would have been installed with a mounting plate like this. You still screw the flange 90 to it, and then your screws from the wall inlet go in here and there. This one must have been for a retrofit application because there's no flange sticking off to the side to screw it to a stud like you'd see in new construction. At some point in the 70s, here's another one, it's missing its switch. At some point in the 70s they switched, and they made a change. you can see it on this one. Notice the screw holes are off to the sides now in the corners, one there and one there. Well, the valve looks identical. It functions the same way. I'm not sure why this change was made, other than maybe it was just so you didn't have to care about your screw lengths going through the pipe, because when the screws are at the top and bottom, even today in your industry standard inlets like vacuum valves, you've got to watch and make sure that screw isn't too long, or else it'll go into the pipe. And in this case, it doesn't matter. This is the Vacu-Maid rough-in. So you have a special adapter elbow, very tight turn, which is quite restrictive to the airflow, but it's also restrictive to extra large debris. So if you're going to get a blockage, it's going to be right here. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. So you have this. You have the plate, which screws to the stud. And then you have this ring, which encompasses the O-ring to seal to the neck of the inlet. And it is what gets glued in to the adapter elbow, sandwiching the metal plate. So your wall assembly looks like that. And you can see those screws are not going to come near the pipe as long as it's straight up or straight down. And then your wall inlet goes like that. So they made these in all kinds of fabulous finishes. In the last 25 years or so, you don't see nearly as much of this. It's either stainless steel or painted white or painted almond or ivory. You can see that the newer ones, they've simplified the construction a little bit with a plastic neck that also holds the micro switch clipped in, and that ball bearing is in its usual spot. One thing, in restaurants you'll see a lot of Vacu-Maid systems. You'll see the inlets, they look pretty much the same. However, if you open them, see how much bigger that neck is? Well, these accept the cuff. These are 1.5 inch ID. These accept the cuff of a 1 1/4 inch hose. So these are referred to as 1 1/4 inch valves. These, even though this neck is maybe 1 3/4 ID, these are referred to as 1.5 inch valves. They accept the cuff of a 1.5 inch hose. And the reason to use these is, in a restaurant, you're oftentimes using an interceptor, a little bucket, so that what you suck up goes into the bucket mostly, and very little dust makes its way through the tubes. And what they wanted was a way to keep the employees from plugging the long hose directly into the wall and sending all that restaurant junk through the pipes. So they would use an 1.5 inch short hose from the inlet to the bucket, and then your long hose would be 1 1/4. So that's why they do that. There's a 1 1/4 inch stainless steel. I think these are very nice looking. And there's a big long Vacu-Maid inlet extension. This would be used like if you had a brick wall and a mounting plate that was installed behind the brick. Well, this would do the trick. And even though this video is about Vacu-Maid inlets, I'll do a quick aside here. Vacu-Maid utility inlet, cast with a micro switch. So Vacuflo inlets can be easily confused, the early ones, with Vacu-Maid inlets. You can see they're fairly similar, but it's kind of easy to tell them apart with them right next to each other. These are two of the early pre-Lexan style Vacuflo inlets, and this one was when they still used the double coil latching relay, so on and off from the buttons. This is late 50s, early 60s, and this one would be earlier mid 60s. And this one now has a switch activated by opening the door. You can see when the hinge comes up, it closes the circuit. Oddly enough, I don't have a Vacuflo utility inlet from this period, but it would have been just this exact door shape on a tube, but this is a later Vacu-Flow utility inlet. This is the more common style. This came out with the Lexan valves in the mid to late 60s, and this turns on when it's opened. Very nice design. So anyway, there you have it.